Well, hello everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment on OLaMan, Living Life with Purity. And today I want to talk about something that is very, very interesting. And this is not something that I kind of seek out in my life because I try to stay sort of within my own, circle, my own little space. I try not to go out too much into other people's work and try to tell them what to do or how to do it. But I want to talk about a situation that's going on down in Texas with the Divine Mercy Mission. And their archbishop down there who has basically shut them down and defrocked their priest. I think his name is Father John Mary. There's a sister down there, religious. I think her name is Sister Amapola. I don't know if I'm getting that name right or not. But I watched a quick little interview with her. I think it was on LifeSite News, or don't know exactly. I don't know if this John Henry Weston had put that out there or not. But I trust John Henry in his judgment on things. And so I watched this interview with the Sister Amapola trying to talk about how her locutions that she says have happened and what goes on with that and what has been the subject matter of these locutions. That's been the subject of all this the interest and debate going on down in the San Antonio Archdiocese. Now, having listened to Sister Amapola's story and her own experiences, I think that she and I could probably sit down, and if you taped our interviews and played them back to back, it would almost be exactly the same things. Her experiences are very much like what mine have been, different in their design and their intention, I believe, from the voices from heaven that are trying to guide us. But our jobs are different. Our roles are different. And heaven knows who you are, as I spoke about in one of my previous segments here. So heaven knows who you are. And heaven will use you as heaven needs. And it's up to you then to say yes to these things. You can say no. And you'll find out what happens when you do say no. Jonah certainly did. Fish or not, Jonah knows what happens when you say no. Now, Jonah was scared for his life, and so I don't blame him a bit. He was being asked to go into Nineveh and tell these people something that they weren't going to want to hear. And to them, he was just another dirty Jew. So he felt for sure that he would just be strung up and lynched or stoned or whatever. He didn't feel that there was any way out of that. So there was no way in hell, so to speak, that he was going to go to Nineveh at that time. It wasn't until our Lord put him into a deep, dark place and Jonah realized that this was true and he needed to act on this. And even what would happen, God and the Holy Spirit were going to protect him. Even if he was to be martyred and killed at that point, things were going to be okay. And in that point there where Jonah understood that, he became super powerful in that moment because he dressed himself in the power of the Holy Spirit and gave up his perceived armor that he thought he was wearing. So he gave himself over. And this is what happens when you yield your will to God's will. And you say that I do not matter in this. It's your intent that matters. When you do that in each day, the devil is put at bay. The devil can't get to you because everything you're doing is about God in that instance, and the devil can't even come close to interfering in what's going on. So Sister Amapola talked about this a little bit in a different way, but I think our influences and what's been happening to us is very, very similar in how it's done, but the messages and the jobs that we have to do are entirely different, but very similar, very, very similar. I mean, she was saying stuff and I was answering questions for her in watching this from the interviewer. I knew exactly what was going on with her. And I think I know exactly what's going on with her archbishop down there. Is very similar to what happened with the bishop here in Fort Wayne, South Bend, back in the early 2000s when I tried talking with him about things that were going on. He just became white as a sheet, didn't want to have anything to do with it, wanted to dismiss me kindly, but I know that he was either talking behind my back and he was laying the groundwork with his other people in his administration of how I was to be dealt with. And it wasn't in a kind way. It was in a dismissive way, and don't let Larry back in. Because what was happening was scary. It should be scary, and they should be scared. So we're going to jump around on this. I'm going to do a few segments on it because this is super, super important. Now, what this Sister Amapola and Divine Mercy people have been going through for all these years is very much a part of an overall mosaic that God is putting in place, I believe, globally. The place of where the real determining battle is going to happen is here in the United States. It's about to take off. It's going to get really bad this spring and summer. So that's all I can say is you want to make sure that you've got your plan, that you know who you are and how you're going to go about these things when they happen. Now, in 2001, and I invite all of you to go watch Sister Amapola's interview, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, but I invite you all to go and watch that and juxtapose that against what I'm about to tell you. So when I had left off with my storyline in the last segment, I had been saved off the side of the building by the smallest man in 3 counties, Bobby Cobbs. My purposeful intent was to do God's work in saving that structure, but it almost cost me my life and Bob's, and what would have done to this whole mission at that point had I been taken out at that time. I'm not saying I'm important to any of this at all. I'm just responding to what has been happening to me, and this is where we've gotten. So I've been saved from imminent death, and then the rest of that spring and summer seemed to be moving along very, very quickly. There was a lot of things going on. I had a lot of visitors coming. There were a lot of people coming seeking answers to things that I couldn't answer for them, but I tried to put them in the right place to be able to discern these things. And I had a priest there in residence with us at this time, and that was Father Robert Havel, a retired priest who was like an uncle to me. And he came to live with me at the property so that he could help take care of some of these infrequent but needing visitors. And he soon found out that his life's work, his ministry was not over being retired. It was just taking a different shape. So I've been having these events, these mystical experiences, these locutions, and I was passing them on to Father Havel for review. And a lot of these things were not so consequential of, that the earth had to stop moving and we had to answer this. This was just like, as Sister had said, and I was able to say, it's formational in doing these things. I think what heaven does is with a new subscriber, if you will, works with them in a way that forms them so that they know that when the big thing happens, they don't sit there and quibble about it. They know that this is what's happening and they're being activated. And so they need to move on these things. And that's one of the reasons why I take a little bit of, grain of salt whenever people say, oh, when something comes up and it's really difficult, can't do anything about it. Oh, it's just God's will, that this happened. I just say that that's always an easy way for people to walk away from the work that they're being called to do. It gives them an easy defensive position to go and stand behind. Our priests and our bishops do this all the time. They don't want to confront and deal with something that might be active in their own community. And this was told me very explicitly by the Monsignor priest who was in charge at that time. It was in 2005. He was in charge of the shrine at Lourdes, France. And when he came to visit me in Rome City just before Christmas of 2005, he took me aside and he said, Larry, he says, I got to tell you, he says, no bishop wants the Blessed Mother in their backyard. It's too much work. And so don't expect your local bishop and those around you to be responsive to anything that's going on. And I said, yes, I know. I said that the push for this and the endorsement will come from outside the diocese, not inside the diocese. He goes, how do you know that? I said, I was already told that. He says, that's exactly right. He said, this will not come from within the diocese. He says, you are going to pay for this every day. They're going to come after you in ways that you can't even understand. And they are going to push and push and push to try to suppress you and keep you from saying the things that you know you need to say. And I was just really surprised at that. And Father Havel was standing there at that time too. And Father Havel just got really quiet and reflective. And I was very, concerned by that remark, but I kind of understood, that this is, you're not dealing with something that's written down with a notepad and a set of instructions as to how to deal with it. So in knowing that and in hearing what Sister Amapola had to say, there are groups of people that are all over the place that things are happening with. And they're being talked to, and I think they're being inspired through these locutions and messages also, these private revelations, if you will, as a means to keep them inspired and ready to do the work when it happens. Because when it comes about, it's going to happen very, very quickly. The devil is really upset, and the devil is going to make a really big run at trying to shut down Christians of all types, but Catholics in particular. They're coming after the Catholics and the message and the depth of commitment that many Catholics have, but many Catholics do not. Many Christians do not. They're comfortable Christians. And this is all going to be tested. We have to be ready for what is coming. Now, when Sister Amapola was talking about how her messages come and how they are delivered, she has to use a notepad. I haven't had anything that's been that necessary for note-taking except for one time. And this happened in and about May of 2001. Father Havel and I would generally have dinner together at 6 o'clock, and I would either go back out and work afterward until the sun went down, or, we would sit and talk, and sometimes we'd get together and we'd pray and we'd go do an evening rosary. And many times we do this evening rosary in the small chapel that I had built for Father Havel so that he had a place to, easily and quickly get to in the building. He was becoming slow moving, and I wanted to make life easier for him. Well, one evening, as we finished dinner, he looked at me and he said, Larry, he says, I'd like to pray a rosary tonight, and I think we need to go to the Hill. And I looked at him and said, the Hill? I said, why do you think we need to go to the Hill? Because I had the same feeling that we needed to move to the Hill. So I want to know what his reason was. He says, I don't know, but it's just been strong on my thoughts all day that we need to go to the Hill and pray tonight. I said, okay, let's go. So I loaded him up. We went down to the Hill, and we're out on the Hill, and we're praying. And then in the midst of it, something happened. And I started having what I thought was a locution. And it was the angel Gabriel was telling me that there was going to be a war like no other fought on this soil, that the enemy was already here. and that this would be a war that would not be won with hammer blows, but with feather strokes. And you've heard me talk about this before. We're not going to win this war with hammer blows, but with feather strokes, which means that this is an ideological battle that's going on. We are in this war, but we haven't even seen the real combatants show themselves yet. And we may not ever, because the combatants may be our friends and family and those around us. And they just don't know that they're being used in this way. Remember, I had said before that the devil can change your perceptions of things. He can't change the facts, but he can change your perceptions. And he works very, very well in this area. Now, you also need to defend yourself against these things by your purposeful intent, or committing yourself each day to doing God's work and seeing where that dome is, that the God's overwhelming and overarching love for us is up there. We have to connect in with that, even above the storminess of the clouds and the activities that are going on around us. We have to be confident in our resolve that God is always there, and that's what our intent is. And when you do that, the art of suffering takes care of anything that the devil is trying to throw at you, because it becomes a non-issue. The devil is only powerful if you give him your attention. So take your attention away from the evil and things like that. Stay focused on the positive. Stay focused on the goodness. Stay focused on these things that the great philosophers who the Western thought process were always looking for the good in an argument. And, this is like their Socrates and Plato and Copernicus, all these guys who had these great thoughts, Aristotle. I mean, they all had a focus on goodness. So they were basically being Christians before Christ came to earth. They were focused on that. They just weren't Christ-centered, but they were knowing about the goodness, and that was God. So I'm up on the hill, and I'm having this message being delivered, and Father Havel stops praying too, and he starts, watching me, and he saw something happening with me. Well, the message continued on, and the concern was about the strength and the conviction of our priests, that they were soft. They were not answering the call as they were directed to, because they had been softened by their formation. Their formators in the seminaries and things like that were soft, and they made these guys soft, and that caused a problem in their development and the way they looked at things going forward. And they're looking at things now. So a lot of these guys are bishops and are elder archbishops and possibly even cardinals that are going on. They've been softened. They've forgotten that the work requires their commitment and them getting their hands dirty, because this is not clean work. This is not an executive level position. So we need to make sure that we have our blue collars on. I'm getting ready to go out and do some work myself here, so I'll be on a excavator here in a little bit doing some work out here today. But this was so important in my thinking that we have to get this out there. Now, as this locution is going on with Gabriel up there on the hill, Father Havel starts taking notice. And after it's all over with, he turns to me and says, "Larry, you have to write that all down." I said, "Write what all down?" He says, "Everything." He says, I heard so much about it. And I'm thinking, I said, "Wait a minute, you heard it?" He says, "Yes." And that's the only time that I had ever been given a message and somebody else felt it or heard it too, and was able to give the exact same wording and tempo of how these things work. Because when you're hearing these things, it's not just the words that matter. It's their tempo and their emotion that's with the words. That's why words matter. But when heaven uses words, they're very, very selective in what it is that they're saying. And we have to be very mindful of that and realize, I think, sometimes that heaven doesn't always use perfect English, which has been in my case. But I think that's also part of making me work for the bread, so to speak, I have to want it and ask for clarity on these things. Because anyone who says out there, and Sister Amapola spoke about this, and that's why I said, yeah, I believe her. There's something there. Because she mentioned, and I've said many, many times, that this grace, if you will, that is given to us and we go through, is not something I would, because the responsibility and the weight that comes with it is very tough to deal with. But the more you deal with it and you answer yes, I firmly believe the more that our Lord sheds even more graces upon you, which gives you more strength going forward. Because if you've answered yes in the initial things, the formation phase, they've strengthened and emboldened you now for when the real work is coming, and the real work is coming. So I believe that all these people around the world who have been having these grace-filled moments, and it's not always in prayer. Sometimes you could be just standing in line or driving down the road or just doing your basic everyday stuff. But since your commitment was already there towards God's feelings and God's overwhelming goodness there, you're in that vein to receive these things, because the devil's not in your thought process right now. There may be crap going on around you, but you're not sitting there stopping what you're doing. You're march forward for God because the devil, got a shot in somehow. You just dismiss it and, you keep walking. You don't give it the time of day. And that's how I've dealt with it. And I saw in her, that's how she deals with it. And I've heard it from other people as well. Joseph Torellia, a great guy, didn't speak a lick of English, and I didn't speak any Ukrainian, but we talked about that when he visited before he died. So the battle that's coming up here, Father Havel heard the talk about it too, and we were both stunned, that how is this going on, these mystical events, how is this happening? But he understood what it was I was going through in that moment, and so he stopped questioning the veracity of what I was bringing to him, because he realized this is what's happening, so we have to judge what is it that we're being asked to do. And many times for me, it was just to prepare for the property, for the number of people that would be coming, and it's still going to happen. People just don't know. But people are going to get really, really scared, and they're going to flock to places what they consider to be refuges and safety. They can't stay there, but what it's going to do is I think it'll give them an affirming moment to where they're going to go back home then, and they're going to have much more strength to deal with these ongoing ideological bombs that are going to be thrown at them. So Father Havel was on board at that time, and he turned to me and he said, "Larry, we have to write all of this down." And I said, "Okay, what are we going to do with it then?" I said, "Give it to the bishop." He says, "No." He says, "This bishop won't do anything with it. He's too comfortable. He doesn't want anything to do with this." He says, "We have to send it to an independent third party so that they can hold this information," somebody who's like a journalist. And so we looked around and we decided on sending it to Michael Brown at Spirit Daily. So we wrote it all down, and we sent the letter off to Michael Brown at Spirit Daily. We also sent a copy to Bishop John Darcy in Fort Wayne, who was our bishop. And so both parties got a copy of it. It was CC'd to both of them, so they both know who was in the chain there of communications. And neither one of them did anything. Neither one of them responded or said a word until, and this was, I think, in May of 2001. And it wasn't until about November of 2001, after 9/11 had happened, that Michael Brown ran the letter. And he printed the whole thing and saying that it was so prescient about what had happened with 9/11. And I was, saying, no. What I had said was not about 9/11. It was far worse than 9/11. Far worse. And we're seeing it play out today. That this would be a battle like no other fought on this soil. Then this is a battle that would not be won with hammer blows, but with feather strokes. And this went quite hand in hand with my my original goal of coming to this town to try to do something to get to America's children. Because what I saw was a great coming apart of the fabric, the moral fabric that this country had been built on. And I just saw that all of our traditions, all of our beauty, all the things that we held in esteem as far as goodness in this world was all being challenged and taken away. And if the kids and the people working with them didn't have that sense of goodness or something in their telos out there that they could go to, what is their goal or objective? That, you know, the world was not going to have a chance as far as moving itself forward as being, whether it be God-fearing or just good-seeking people. That the goodness that they were seeking, their telos, was going to be destroyed. So I was very moved by the interview with this sister Amapola and how she said it was going on, trying to explain it to other people. It's very similar to how I've gone through and tried to explain it to people. Some things you can't use words. It was very, very helpful when Father Havel experienced it with me. It's the only time it ever happened. But he became quite a believer in that moment. And it was a great blessing for me that somebody that I held in great esteem and valued their opinion on things was able to confirm that I was not making things up. And from that moment on, our relationship changed in a good way. And I'm seeing all this that I've been sitting on for 23, 24 years now is all coming about. It's going to get really bad. And people need to know that the only way you're going to get through this is by, you know, hitching yourself to the right wagon. And these confirmations I'm getting from other people out there, the Sister Amapola and what's going on down there, the one thing I've got to say to their Archbishop down there is he needs to get some courage. He needs to man the hell up, and he needs to talk to these people. He needs to have separate interviews with each of them, record their takes, get them away from each other, get them all to state what it is that they know, when they knew it, and how they know it. I'm willing to take the same test. I've talked with other people too. They wanted to test me on things, and you know, that's their nature, and I understand that. But when we start getting to the truth points and the hard part of the discussion, they get really scared, because I think what they do is they see the truth in it, and they see that the only way to fix these things is to have the hard discussions with these people and fix them. So I'm not saying all the priests out there are bad. There's some really strong ones out there I see. There's some that are much more in tune, I think, with what God's message, Our Lady's message of purity is. And they're strong in that. And I see some others that are weak. And we have to not dismiss them, but we have to rehabilitate them, and we have to help them. And you're going to help them by being strong in your own resolve and saying no sometimes when they come up with something that is out there. And you'll know it when it happens. It's like Sister Amapola saying, you know when these things are happening, that it's not you, because your intellect is having a discussion and a question and answer with the other intellect that's presenting to you. And I'm not saying, she said she's heard from Jesus and saints and all that other stuff. I can't say that. I know that there's been two voices that I've heard and discerned that I can know who they are when they're happening. One is the Blessed Mother, and the other one is the Angel Gabriel. I know those two voices, and I know their pattern, and I know how they go about it. And I think everybody out there, the way I'm spoken to and what I'm being asked to do is going to be obviously different than what Sister Amapola is going to do. But I think that the messages and how it works is very, very similar. And I'm going to be dialing down on this a bit more. I'm going to be drilling down on this, as they say, for more facts. I'm going to watch all these things and I'm going to report more on it. But my feeling is that there's something solid there that needs to be discussed. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be discerned. And these things aren't happening with anyone saying you have time. We don't have time. We've had time. Time is up. We need to move. And we need to be ready to move, and we need to be ready to answer the call for purity that's being asked of us. We need to be able to say no to those around us who want us to take on silly notions and different concepts about reality that aren't true. This is all part of the yielding yourself to what society is going to want. And it happens all the time. People are afraid to be canceled. They're afraid to be shut down or criticized for saying what they know is right in the face of the crudity and the idiot, thinking that's going on around us. I'm not going to be a part of this, and you need to. And you need to sit there and also in your own families, in your own areas, when we have these conflicts, it's very, very important that with people who want to bring these flawed thinking principles into your life and into your family and into your sphere, you have to say no. But you don't shut them out. You keep the door open for it. They're going to shut you out. Oh, yeah, they're going to shut you out. They're going to call you all kinds of names. They're going to call you a Christian nationalist. They're going to call you a Jesus freak. They're going to call you all these things. That's okay. Don't use the same thinking with them. Feather strokes. Leave the door open for the path to come back in. Don't exclude them just because their thinking is flawed and they think you're a bad person. This is part of their tactic. You're okay. Get better. Get stronger. Work on it. And let's pray for this Archbishop down in San Antonio and all of his staff to open up their hearts and to realize that this is going on. The folks down there in Divine Mercy Mission are not exclusively part of the dynamic that heaven is doing with us, all of us. I think all of you are being talked to too. I just don't think a lot of us sit still long enough to let the message sink in. A few good minutes of just sitting quiet each day can do a lot for your life. Turn all your influences off, just sit quietly. You might be driving, so that's not turning off all the influences. But find those quiet points in your day. Turn off your stimulus. Turn God on and say, Lord, what is it you need of me today? Give me my job assignment. I'll do it. So we're going to dial back on this a little bit. We're going to not be letting this thing go. But in 2001, when I had that event, and everyone wanted to include it as being the forecasting or foretelling of the 9/11 event, no. 9/11 pales in comparison to what's going on right now. Just pales in comparison. We're going to be okay. It's going to take some tolls on us. But you have to be strong and you have to realize what it is that you're fighting for and what your weapons are. Your weapons are the truth. Your weapons are God's presence. That's your armor you put on each day. It's not going to come with a big symbol of a cross. It's not going to come with something that you do as far as some sort of token representation of God's presence. It's by you getting out there and working at it each day. Do the work. Get involved. Don't be quiet. Don't sit still and say, oh, it's God's will. It's God's will that He gave you an intellect and two hands. He expects you to use them. So I know there's a lot of people out there are feeble. There's a lot of people out there that are inexperienced, younger. You know what? I was too. Get out and do something. Move the ball forward. Take out the obstructions. Keep God as your focus. Ignore the devil. These other things. If you keep God as your focus, the other stuff becomes just irrelevant. And the devil loves a stage. So don't give the devil a stage and a platform. Keep God, strong in your resolve, current in your thoughts, and get through the day and do your stuff. So I'm going to come back on this, but I needed to get this out there now while it was fresh on my mind before I went out and I started my day of working out there, because I know there will be a lot more will come to me on this, but I think that what is going on with the Divine Mercy mission in San Antonio is real. I think it needs to be looked at in that light and not dismissed. And I would invite the Archbishop of San Antonio and anyone else who has any questions to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to have a frank discussion with them. They might like what they're going to hear. I'll talk more about that later on, but keep in mind, everybody, I love you, and I'll be back.